Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. We are shifting a little bit, a little pivot, but we're still on the track of releasing. If you've noticed the pattern of releasing the 2021 episodes, it's like every other week. Like one week is an OG episode, the next week is a present moment episode, and that's kind of how it's following the pattern. Because as I'm re-listening to them myself, it goes beyond, like you'll notice in the title, it doesn't say my story, as in we're continuing that track, but we are, because as I've listened back to it, it just turns into a conversation. So instead of just recanting the story, we're having a conversation about it and we're keeping that going with sexual trauma, trauma in general, and how it impacts the mind, the psyche, the heart, the body, the soul, and ways that we feel that, move through it, gain a relationship with it, gain a relationship with the darkness, to then dance with the darkness and integrate light back in, the light that was never lost. If you are one to listen chronologically, I would say this is technically part four, my story, part four. What's happening now, though, is I'm going to be starting to share the healing, how that had started, like my very entry point into this so-called healing journey. And I mentioned it a little bit in 2021, which you'll hear, but I just want to reiterate that I started this path in 2014, technically. If we want to be like super technical, of when I started to look at my stuff was in 2014 because I had broken up with my first love. We were together for about 3 years or something like that. And then it got to a point we were both just hurting each other. And then I was wanting to pause and take accountability and move forward. And then we were just on different paths. So then I made the decision to leave, noticing that nothing was changing and the time, like it was just done. And the very first self-awareness came up because of that, because of the relationship ending, because you know how most of the time, like you know, in some sense that a relationship is coming to an end before you actually break up. So when I was in that phase, that was really the first time that any type of self-reflection and self-awareness was coming to the forefront. And I was noticing that I was reacting very much so in the way that my mom had reacted to things growing up, and the unserving behaviors, the hurtful behaviors I was putting on to my boyfriend at the time. So then I was reflecting and I was pausing. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like my mother in a lot of ways, and in the ways that I don't want to be, and in the ways that I see that it within the family line, like it also didn't just start with her, and seeing that it's also in me now, and now I want to take responsibility to shift that is when that started. And it was a very simple process of just like I want to be a better person was the only goal. And I didn't but I didn't really still have any tools, and that's what you'll hear is the real work, facing my darkness, facing my trauma, facing that utteral, like guttural soul pain didn't start until 2017, which is okay because that stuff takes time. And also, I actually have a different podcast episode that talks about this, like the self-development journey versus the healing journey. In 2014, that's when I started the self-development journey. And I feel like everyone, that's where we start. And that's totally okay and honestly suggested, because if you don't have any tools in your tool belt and any built internal resilience, and then you just want to immediately dive into the darkness, you're not gonna, no, it's not sustainable. And it just is just stuff, just that's where people can really fall and get stuck into a dark hole or go way further beyond destructive habits or even addiction, self-harm, suicidal ideation. Like I've seen that happen within my work when people have tried to just dive into their shadows and darkness without any type of foundational work built beforehand. And so that's why starting in this whole self-development realm is actually quite essential. So that's where that was going for me was 2014 to 2017 was like the self-development era. And then 2017 started the healing journey era. And that's what this episode talks about. It's when that started for me. And this is quite the inception episode because right now you're listening and it's current day Kelsey 2024. And then we go back to 2021 Kelsey speaking, but then 2021 Kelsey is speaking and reflecting on 2017 Kelsey. So that if this is not a physical representation that time is an illusion and healing is not linear and that everything is always happening at once and at the same time, if you believe in those spiritual concepts, like this is that. And what's really special about this is I bring on the first few pieces of poetry that I had ever wrote that reflected on my trauma where I was first expressing myself. So in any form of expression during this when my internal world was getting blasted open and it was kind of like there's no other option but to face yourself or you're going to be living in complete misery if you don't, was I went to poetry. It came through that, and then it came through art. But poetry was the very first point of contact. And I read some of my pieces of what I first wrote down. So that's really special. And but also what's also I'm like, oh, interesting. I may do oh God, what am I getting myself into as I speak this out loud into the world? I may do a live on this or make a reel or some kind of content because when I read it in 2021, it was my first time reading it out loud. And I could hear that I wasn't fully in my body when I read it because I read it very fast and my voice was very high and there was no infliction or just emotion in my voice when I was reading the poetry. And you'll hear it, you'll know. So I kind of want to give that space to be felt, seen, and heard again. So that might be in the works. And I also share my artwork, the very first expressive art pieces that I made, that I ever made. The first ones, I talk about three pieces, and those are near and dear to my heart. And I'll probably share those also on Instagram because it's the podcast platform, so you can't physically see it. And because of that, if you're going to continue listening the whole time, now is your trigger warning because when I'm bringing in the poetry and I'm bringing in the art pieces, it is raw and vulnerable and bringing you into where my mind was and where my current state of existing was when I was creating those pieces of where I was at in the first moments of facing the fact that I've survived sexual trauma. So this is your trigger warning if you're going to continue listening to that episode because that brings you into that moment of just witnessing that. And the key element also that I need to bring into this now moment that wasn't mentioned, this the fall of 2017 is what this whole thing is reflecting on of this starter point for me. What wasn't shared in 4 years ago, which is the key element to this whole freaking thing, is that like I told you, this is part of the story that I haven't like shared yet, and that we haven't been, yeah, putting it out there. And next week episode, you're gonna hear more about it because we're there. The moment has arrived where we now show up to be seen in that phase and that piece that has been hidden for quite some time from the public. Oh, yay for discomfort. But the key element here was that in 2017, the fall of it is when I had started grad school to study, to learn, to become an art therapist. It was also the exact time that I had left an abusive relationship, the same week. And that relationship is a thing that I have not talked about. And that was a big chunk of my life and a big chunk of my healing journey. And the only reason that this had been kickstarted is because I had broken up with him and I was finally safe. So then all of my body, my brain, my all of that was like, oh, we have the space to actually start looking at this stuff now because you are safe and not in harm's way anymore. Here's what you got to look at now, babe. Here it is. And that's what was funneling out in residency, and that's what kickstarted this whole thing, is because I left the abusive relationship and then I had started a new path in all realms because I had left everything. Well, and I had left I had left everything behind and I was living out of my car, crashing at a friend's house, and then just journeyed on to grad school. And I wasn't talking to my parents at the time. I didn't have a relationship with them, so they had no idea what was going on. So yeah, that's what was going that's what happened. And because I made that decision, I would say is what actually kick-started it. It wasn't, I mean, obviously we love the exposure to the healing medicine that is art, and that is definitely a big factor, but it's like I made this big choice for myself and my own healing in my soul before I went to residency, and then I got into residency and is like, okay, now here's the journey of how you learn how to be with all of that now. So yeah, wanted to bring that to the forefront of that missing piece that I hadn't ever shared of when I'm like, here's my healing journey that started. Okay, but why did it actually also start is because I left trauma myself. And what's wild and not a coincidence is as I'm coming back in 2024 to just lay this all out here, like last week or whatever, it landed and integrated for me on a deeper level of, and you hear it. I know I probably would sound like a broken record right now, but all the well-known spiritual teachers, gurus out there, they all say the same thing because it is born and it is a seed of truth, is that this whole path and this life is not about the destination, it's about the journey. But it's not necessarily easy to actually integrate that truth because the journey also consists of this turmoil, of this trauma, of this depth, of this density. And that is also part of this truth of like, oh, we're meant to enjoy the journey. Because when I was in that, the destination is just like, oh my God, I just want to be free. I want to be healed. Get me the fuck out of this? But then that process could quickly turn into one, also a trauma response if you're just always like chasing to get to the next place and to the destination because right now is too painful. Yeah, been there. Because why would we want to be present in the trauma and the turmoil? You don't. I get it. I understand. And now for me, as I'm coming back and facing my darkness in a new light and re-releasing all the stuff that I had out there, and then I went back and try to hide it away and push it back down to the shadows to not have everyone fucking know this stuff, which was going against my soul. So again, I've mentioned this plenty of times that this is not everyone's path to be sharing in the way that I'm sharing on this platform and what I'm doing right now. But if it's of your soul's path and what you came here to do, and then you don't do it, and then you try to shove down what your soul came here to do and suppress it into the shadows, uh, that's another way that suffering happens. Suffering happens when we avoid our trauma and avoid our darkness, and suffering happens when we're avoiding our true calling of our soul and our authenticity. And for me, like the process of sharing my story and all of the steps along the way is the journey. And now I get to come back through a new perspective of like, holy shit, of coming back into gratitude, into some weird twisted form of enjoyment of like, look at where you were, look at what happened, look at how you moved through it and how you got to change and transform and transmute and accept and unconditionally love it all to be here now. And then that's also the continuous journey because it isn't just a destination of being quote unquote healed. It isn't just a destination of full liberation. And in that type of liberation is then we'll only be satisfied if we're ever there. But if you get there, let me know. I'd like to be your friend. But yeah, it's not about that. It's about learning how to be present in every moment and feel and be with fully every moment. And that's how we're enjoying the journey. Because even if you do reach your own perceived state of being healed or liberated, if you're still living this human experience, the paradox is still going to visit you. Impermanence is still going to visit you. The density, the darkness is still going to visit you. But as you learn how to be with every moment, you can use that word instead of enjoy every moment and really be with, enjoy the journey, then we're living. Then we're not attached to outcomes. Because that's also where suffering comes in. These Buddhist philosophies, by the way, is if we attach to the outcome of I will not be happy or satisfied or have an easeful life unless I'm healed or liberated, that's creating suffering. When if we let go of the outcome and we're just doing what we know that we're here to do and we're following that inner guidance, we're following the guidance that is beyond us without attached to an outcome. That's it. That's it. So that's I might sound like I'm rambling, and maybe I am, because like I said, this is just a different layer that was integrating for me recently. So I wanted to like share it now of, oh yeah, I mean coming up to whoops, coming slammed my mic down. Coming up to share again is not pleasant. It's not something that my human self, my ego wants to do. But can I enjoy the journey and all the beauty that's here in the now because I'm showing back up in full alignment with my soul? Even though what I'm talking about is about the darkness and things that people avoid confronting, and my body feels discomfort every time I fucking do this. Can I find enjoyment in the process and trust the process of everything that's unfolding and new seeds that are being planted because I'm doing this? Because I am on this journey, because I am on this path of liberation, this lovely healing journey. Can I enjoy all of it? And that's just a question to ask yourself. Can you enjoy all of it? Can you be with all of it and it be okay? Okay, that's it. I think that's all I gotta say. I won't be coming back on. So as you listen to the old one, when the episode ends, it is over. So here it is. The healing journey begins. Welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. I am an art therapist who believes that the only way we can create light in our lives is by having the courage to feel our darkness. On this show, I will discuss trauma and ways to heal through modalities like art therapy, sexuality, and spirituality. I have been called to share my story to show that even in the midst of pain, I have found purpose. So join me as I continue the healing journey and create light within while feeling the darkness. I hope it inspires you to do the same. Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. You just listened to my launch, so those first 5 episodes of me talking about art therapy, what it takes to be an art therapist, and then my trauma story. I had released those all at once to introduce my podcast. Now we are officially here to where I'm going to be releasing episodes on a weekly basis. I'm going to do my best to release episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, having 2 episodes a week, but definitely be having at least 1 a week. And this is real. I have officially told people. People know about it. A few people have already subscribed. Thank you very much. And I don't even know. I just want to scream. I have so much excitement that this is actually happening. I created this. This is mine. Hello, and we're here. And let it begin. I'm just so excited to actually have a podcast, and then it's still nerve-wracking knowing that if you're here on this episode, you have most likely listened to the other episodes with my trauma story, and knowing that's definitely out in the world, and the people that I told about had listened to it, and it's a vulnerable place. But again, that's why I'm here and why I wanted to start the podcast, to be that person, to be an example of showing my vulnerability and having the courage to speak about my trauma and start the conversations that come from it. Because as I go on in life, I realize people need to hear it, and I'm here for it. Now I am transitioning into telling you all about my healing journey and how that started for me. For me and my story, I'm just literally starting from the beginning and walking you all through it. So I'm starting from the trauma where that had started for me, which was a catalytic moment in completely shifting my life, and then starting from the very beginning of my healing journey. I had some self-growth moments at the beginning of college, like breaking up with my first boyfriend, my first love, sophomore year of college near the end. That was a little bit of a wake-up moment of realizing the toxic behaviors that I had inherited from my family, and then starting to realize that I was then projecting them onto that significant other and friends and very close friends in my life, and realizing I want to learn how to heal from that, to not be so projecting and become more loving. That was very baby steps. I did change, but there was still a lot there because I still hadn't really sat with emotions yet. So my healing journey really kickstarted when I got to grad school to study to become an art therapist. Honestly, I didn't really even know what art therapy was, but I was about to go to grad school for it. I just knew that it was going to be using art to help people. I understand it, the general sense that it was going to be counseling and I was going to be using art, but I had no idea what that actually meant. So I started grad school in August of 2017, and it was an online program. For the first week of every semester, all students had to be on campus. So that first week you were then meeting your cohort. If you were first getting into grad school, I met all of my cohort, which was huge. And then you meet your professors, and it's the first week of school, and they go through all of the syllabus and all that stuff. Before this moment, I don't think I had ever went out and did something this big for myself alone. I had some accomplishments in life, but I was always very guided and I felt very sheltered. So this was the first big thing I did alone. And I was 23 years old going to my very first residency, and it just felt like I was adulting for the first time. Then, like I said, entering grad school to become an art therapist, I didn't really know what art therapy was. I didn't really do that much research on it. I just knew I hated everything else in school, but I liked art and I wanted to help people, so this seemed like a good fit. So coming into residency, there was a couple assignments that we needed to complete to bring to class and then talk about. So this was the first art therapy assignment that I engaged in, and in creating art in a therapeutic way, which was mind-blowing in itself because I was so used to creating for undergrad and being in a fine arts setting, creating art, and it had to look a certain way, and you're grading on exactly what it looked like. Then I come to residency, and we're in class all day, every day. Then one of the first classes, students were asked to sit in a circle and then take turns sharing that homework piece, that art therapy homework, and sharing what their artwork meant. So this was the first time I had actually been exposed to such vulnerability, that I discovered that each piece of artwork that these students and myself created bared a part of their soul. I mean, I felt honored to be in this container of such courageous individuals. And immediately something was being stirred up inside of me. It was like for the first time ever that my darkness felt safe enough to come to the surface. It kind of felt like I got hit with a fucking brick, but it was also relieving in a way. Like I was sitting in class, listening, learning, absorbing all of the emotions that were surrounding, especially when we were sharing. And then in the downtimes, or when I was supposed to just be fully focused on their lecture, I just felt all of this like bubbled up inside of me. And then it kind of clicked. I was like, oh my God, I have to express this self. I have to express myself. I have to get this out or I'm going to fucking explode. So in between classes and kind of during classes, I was writing poetry and doing art, like just straight up abstract art to express my emotions. And this was the first time I had ever done it, even though I just entered grad school to be an art therapist, which is exactly that. It was kind of surprising that I hadn't even expressed myself in this raw way before with the sexual traumas. I really don't even think until residency that I had fully accepted that I was a victim of sexual abuse through those time periods in my life. I honestly don't know how I held it together in between classes and just during all of residency, because during those breaks and went home for the night, so I hadn't really met anyone yet, so I was just in a hotel room by myself. It was a very dark place, man. I was writing all kinds of poetry and just getting it out and feeling the anger and despair. But it needed to come out. It had been suppressed for so many years, and then when I just entered this safe container of art therapy and being around all these people that are on this process and journey of being vulnerable and becoming therapists themselves, it felt safe. And I think a lot of the times our brain will not have us remember the trauma until we are to a place of safety and it is time to then remember it and work through it. So if you're listening to this now and thinking like, oh shit, I am not there yet, that is totally okay. Everyone's journey is different, but you're here now, especially even listening to that podcast. Like this is a decision you're making right now to be listening, and it's on the healing journey, and it looks different for everybody. So it's okay if you don't feel like you're there or wherever you need to be, because I'm going to tell you right now, you are exactly where you need to be right in this moment. But going back to residency, when I would go back to my hotel room, I would just cry. And I don't think then I was consciously aware, but I think my soul knew I was stepping into a new life. And I mean, shit, this could have been my very first ego death that I was experiencing. Okay, so I didn't expect to do this, but I feel like it'd be helpful. I actually have the poems still that I wrote during residency. It's in a very specific sketchbook, and I just looked through it. I wrote 10 things. I'm not going to read all of them, but I would like to read some of them to you. So again, this is very raw and emotional. This was the first time that I had sat with the fact that I had actually been a victim of sexual trauma and then expressing it. So because of that, I'm going to give a trigger warning right now. Okay, this is real time, by the way. I haven't looked at this in years, so I am again feeling all shaky, but I'm here and we're doing this. Okay. Staring at a blank page was so closed off to expressing my emotions because I just wanted to forget. Pretend that it didn't happen means that it didn't, right? It just go away and never come up in any other aspect of life. Wanting to express myself now, but not knowing how. How can you ever create something beautiful out of something terrible? Never admitted I was in denial, but still feeling in denial at times. If you barely remember it, did it happen? Did it happen? How did I get there? How did it happen? But it did. So that was the very first thing I had ever written. I like the line, how can you even create something beautiful out of something terrible? This right here, this podcast is the something beautiful out of something terrible. It really is. Because now I am to a point in my healing that I can talk about this and share it and share the wisdom that comes from it, and that it's not just trauma. It can be turned into something bigger, and it's not something to forget. It's something to accept and transform, because you deserve that transformation. And from that transformation comes a whole world of light and love that at the time, because of trauma, you didn't even know existed anymore. But it does. It still exists, and there's so much more to experience in life. Okay, I'm going to read like 3 or 4 more. And I rewrote all of these poems, and I put them in my final art show for graduation, because my art show, I really wanted, since my thesis was about my own trauma, then I wanted my art show to kind of emanate that and then begin to tell my story. So I had all of this raw artwork in a box, kind of saying like, here's the beginning, and here's what the dark and scary stuff but needed to be felt. And then the outside I had artworks after, like through getting some of the healing. So then beginning to embrace the light. So I have shared these poems and stuff before, but I haven't actually read them out loud to people. So here you are, world. You're welcome. And I will go into more of the art show and that experience, but that will be later. Okay, next one. This one gets me still. All right. I don't think it hurt. Does that count? I don't think I was held down. Does that count? I think I was flirting. Does that count? I don't think I gave consent but didn't say no or stop. Does that count? He still made sure I got home the next day. Does that count? The next day, not knowing where I was scared. Does that count? I didn't want to tell anyone. Does that count? I feel like shit. Does that count? That one is huge, because society just loves to question you, especially women, if your trauma is bad enough or significant enough to count, or if it was actually rape. And you know what? It does count, okay? It all counts. If you feel unsafe, it counts. That's a traumatic experience. That can be a whole other rant and just a podcast episode in itself. But I'll leave you with that. I'm going to go on to the next poem now. I feel scared. I feel cheated. I feel confused. I feel hurt. I feel alone. I feel sad. I feel like a burden. I feel ashamed. I feel violated. I feel nervous. I feel paranoid. I feel pressured. I feel fine. I feel like I should be better. Ooh, that last line. I feel like I should be better. That's another societal thing. Like, something happens and then we're just supposed to move on and get over it and get on with life, when no, this is now a part of life. This is now a part of our being. You don't just get over it. You learn to accept it and work through it and then build your life around this thing. Like, it's not going to go away. I'll tell you that right now. So if any of you are feeling like that, like you should be better, you're already enough. One, it's okay to not be okay. It's all a process. You're getting there, and better is not an end goal. The healing process is new level, new devils. It's a constant journey that's ever evolving. So what is better anyway? It's all up to you in your own state of mind. So do the best you can with not focusing on how it should be and what better looks like, because it's all up to you. And there's no end to better, if that makes sense. And like I said earlier, you are exactly where you're meant to be right now in this moment. All right, and the next one again hits on the whole society thing. So that was a big story that I was working through because I felt such societal shame from the stigma of alcohol and rape. You should have taken better care of yourself. You should have been more cautious. You should know the dangers. You shouldn't have drank so much. You shouldn't have worn that. You should know how guys are now. You shouldn't trust so easily. You should have known better. You could have prevented this. It's your fault. Ooh, man, I told you guys I had a lot of blame and the burden, and had a lot of the blame on myself. Like, just that last line alone, like, it went from you shouldn't, as if like someone else was telling me things, and then the last two lines it flipped and said, you could have prevented this, it's your fault. So it was like I was talking to myself. Like, I told you I had all this blame on myself, and that it was my responsibility to be protected, and it was my responsibility to not get abused, when in reality I can't control other people's reactions. And I had said in a previous episode that sometimes bad things happen to people and there's nothing we can do about it. But I obviously was not. I was not there yet to accept that fact. But, isn't that so irritating to listen to? And just, I can like hear it in a societal way of all of these like shoulds. Like, you should have known better and taken better care of yourself. Like, no. The rapist shouldn't have been a rapist. That's not my fault that I was out and drinking. And I had to tell myself that a lot. It was like I had to convince myself, because it took me a long time to actually believe it, because it feels like a lot of times society is just out to get women, that I wasn't going to be believed, and it was my fault. And I want you to know, you all to know, that if anything had happened to you, it's not your fault. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to read. I'd skipped over a few, so those first few ones were kind of in order of how I wrote them, and then I had a few more, and then this one, so this is kind of near the end of residency of writing this, and then the anger hit. So this one. I hate that I'm a victim. I'm angry that I'm a victim. Why am I a victim? Why have I been a victim repeatedly? I don't want to be labeled as a victim. I don't identify as a victim. I don't want your pity. I'm not what has happened to me. Okay, even reading that like second to last line, I heard it in my own voice by saying, I don't want your pity. Because I don't want your pity. No one needs that. We just need someone to just sit there. We don't need to be pitied, because shit happens and we can't change it. Then this kind of makes me think of Brene Brown's explanation of sympathy versus empathy. So that sympathy is like, oh, I feel so sorry for you. And that kind of resonates with me as far as if you're being pitied when you're trying to like share with someone about your abuse, instead of having the empathy, like, oh man, that's tough. Like, I feel for you. You know, I'm with you on this. I'm here and I'm going to be in this space while you're sharing this thing, instead of like, oh, like, man, I feel so sorry for you. Like, no, that's not helpful. And Brene Brown does a wonderful job of explaining that. So if you've never heard that before, I believe she even has a little video of describing the differences between sympathy and empathy. But whew, that was good. That was good. I'm glad I shared that with you all. And that was from August of 2017. So that was the beginning of it. Boom, right there. I brought you guys in. And then I created a few art pieces. I have 3 art pieces that I just absolutely love, and they are because they are so raw. And I'll put them in the show notes. I believe that I can add images in the show notes. Then if that doesn't work, I'll put a link to my blog, because I am also kind of creating a blog that goes along with all these episodes that I'm going to be creating on the podcast, and those images will be on there if it doesn't show up in the show notes. So I'll set the scene for you a little bit. It was in between classes. It was when I had a longer break, like maybe 2 or 3 hours before I had to be at the next class, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna explode. I gotta get out of here and do something. And so I just go outside and I sit on this like cement stairwell thing, but it was like the cement railing, but it was obviously thick enough because I just sat on it and then posted up and had painting supplies and my big sketchbook. People definitely could have been walking by and seeing this all go down, but apparently I put up an energetic field and no one bugged me, and I was just zoned in my own little world, about to do some art therapy on myself for the very first time. So the first image, I'll describe it first and then what it means. I used purple paint and then a black oil pastel crayon. So the purple paint is on the left side of the picture, and it was acrylic paint, and so I just took like a foam brush and dipped it in the paint and then put it to the paper and just went kind of wild with it. And so there's like kind of a smaller paint blob, and then it kind of explodes out, like the brushes were just all going outwards. And then with the black oil pastel, I made this figure. So this figure kind of takes up the whole page, is very large, and then its arms are long and they're just kind of waving outwards, and then they're inside the purple thing. So the purple is me, and then the black is like this representation of all these abusers that then they are invading my space, and then that they are inside of me, and and then that's in the purple with it going outward is this like combustion. It's all going out. So it's like my energy changed. The figure touched me, and then everything is just going outward and getting scattered. Yeah, that I was once contained and pieced together, and then now I'm not, and that I was forever changed. And I really am still awestruck at how big the combustion feels when you look at the purple blob that it spreads out so far in every direction. And then the second image, I used purple and black again to represent the same things, purple representing myself. Actually, no, the black this time kind of represents the trauma and darkness that is now inside of me because of being abused. So I had like a little blob in the middle of the page of purple, and then I have the black crayon going outward. So there is just so much energy into this, and it's the purple is in the center, and then the black is kind of like surrounding this purple and all over on top of it, so you can't really see the purple, and then the black is just so thick and the lines are all going outward, off the page in all directions. So I feel like this piece shows what the combustion feels like internally, that in that moment I felt the darkness all throughout my body, that it was this inner door opened up inside of me and all the darkness was bouncing all around, all up in me. So the energy that energy went into then creating this piece. Like that literally became, the unconscious became conscious. Then I was looking at it into physical form, and I just like could point at that and be like, that's how I feel. That's what's going on inside of me right now. Which is the beauty of art therapy. But if anyone had saw me creating this piece outside, they probably could instantly understand I was having an intense moment. So I was very grateful I was not bugged by anybody. Then the last image, I created all of these in one sitting, by the way. So again, the purple represents me, and then this time the black it represents the essence of all abusers, and then there's black circles in this piece, and that represents society and some people in my life. So again, the purple blob is in the center of the page, but this time at the bottom, and is still kind of combusting outward in all directions. And then the black figure is on the left corner of the page. And so this one's really interesting. It reminds me of going back to the like You Should Have Known Better poem. I feel like that these two pieces would really like correlate well together. The black figure is in the corner, and then at the top I have circles. Like I just have 6 circles going in a line across the top of the page. So the abuser has one hand overarching on top of me, kind of like this barrier of like holding me down. And then the other hand of the abuser has his hand in every circle. So it's like the abuser kind of has their hand in every piece of society. From the circles, they all have a piece coming down onto me too that is also holding me down. With the hand going into all of the circles, so all of society, it's like the abuser has a hand in manipulating the society's view of the person that they actually abuse, to where then the society is coming down onto the survivor, which is the whole like, you should have known better, you shouldn't have drank so much, why did you do this, and like blaming them for actually being a victim of abuse when they didn't have any control of the situation. Okay, I kind of just explained that when looking at it, and I'm looking at something now that's written down, explaining it a little bit more clear, so I'm going to read that too. So again, to reiterate, the purple represents me, the black figure represents the essence of all abusers, the black circles represents people in society and in my life, and then the abuser has one hand on me, and then a hand in each member of society, that the abuser influences, manipulates the perception of society, then that perception comes down onto me. So I am then held down by all of these factors. I feel that society does not support victims of abuse. Then it feels like we are viewed as guilty until proven innocent, which, yeah, that's a big one. Then I really felt the pressure of this, which was the main contributing factor to my silence for all of these years. Wow. Yep. I just impressed myself by reflecting on all of these images. Like, I have literally come so far, and I just love that I created this moment for y'all, so you got a window into where I was at, and that I'm not there anymore, and I'm so thankful. It was really hard, but it's just a little bit at a time, and you are not always going to be stuck in that dark place. And to reiterate that those 3 art pieces I just described, those were the first ones of where I expressed myself in that way. I did not know how to express myself with art until starting grad school, until that very first residency, then let alone talk about such deep emotions. But even still, those 3 pieces still had so much to say. So I had no idea what I was doing, but that just communicated a lot and had a lot of healing behind it. So that just backs up what I've been saying, that you don't have to know what you're doing, and there's still going to be a lot of benefit and a lot of healing that comes from using art. That there is endless value in art therapy. And when coming to art therapy sessions, you have to know what you're doing, and something is going to come up, and then you will be able to process it. This very first residency I experienced changed my life. Like, everything shifted from that moment forward. I had finally gotten to a place of feeling my feelings, and then all of this was surface. It was a gift to then work through it, because I had not realized how much that this was actually taking control of my life. And I'm so grateful that it all did come to the surface, because now I'm taking control back of my own life. And it's so exciting because now I'm here and I have this podcast and I'm super excited about it and I get to do all these things. And I'm also still healing and unraveling and in dark places, but now I know how to navigate them and to work through it and not get stuck as long. And if I'm getting stuck, then I have my own therapist to help me through that too. So I hope by hearing my raw moments makes you feel less alone. And I just want to break that illusion because we are not alone. There is always someone out there who can connect and relate, and in times like this, in our darkness, we really do need that community. And separation really is an illusion. There are so many people out there that are willing and able to be of some kind of support system for you, or just be there. It just comes down to your own personal choice to speak up, and I know that's scary and takes time, so just to put yourself out there in some ways and tell your own story, because then you're going to draw in the people of the community that you need and that you would need help to work through this time. And having community and support doesn't always mean that you're going to be constantly in the darkness and sharing the darkness and never anything else. It's just creating this safe space of having people in your life to where it is safe to be real and completely yourself and be open, that when you are in a dark place that you can go to them about it. But then you also go to them about everything else in life. But when the dark times happen, that you have that support that's there. Okay, that is it for this episode, so stay tuned. My next one will be coming out on Thursday, and then from there I'm going to be trying to produce episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so stay tuned. Thank you for listening and creating light with me. If you enjoyed the show, spread the love by subscribing, leaving a review, or share it with a friend. If you're related to this episode, reach out and let me know. Ways to connect are listed in the show notes. And until next time, remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.